Welcome back to day 30 of our chess journey to 1500 ELO on chess.com. Today marks 1 month of us doing this, so I just want to thank you all for everything so far. Let's jump on into our game today and see who our opponent's going to be. Today I think we'll try to recoup our losses from yesterday, and we get an opponent called Aria 119 from Iran. Let's go with 1d4 as per usual and play in a Queen's Gambit type of setup. This is the second time we face the King's Indian defense. And here I think we might as well just go on ahead and play knight to f3. I don't quite remember the most accurate moves here from last time when we looked at the evaluation. I don't think I like this move because we might lose our bishop pair. So I'm looking at knight c3 perhaps, or hitting this knight, but hitting the knight doesn't quite help us that much because we would be knocked back, but that might not be all that bad. I think last time I talked about this too, that I want to develop this bishop before closing down our pawn structure, otherwise it's going to be weak and difficult to move. I expect our opponent to castle here perhaps, but this I think is a welcome sight. Now they weakened their king, and if they do proceed to do this, then I don't think we would mind because we would be able to threaten their king. They played d6 here, and I think we'll go on ahead and proceed with normal developing moves here. I'm curious as to the difference here between e3 and knight to c3. But I think we'll just try to get towards castling as quickly as possible. And this move doesn't do all that much by itself. So let's go e3. So we might see c5. We might see knight to c6 perhaps, hitting this pawn, which is now defended though. This might be a move, but then we would probably just play h3 I think, and if they capture we would be quite happy. e5 is not a move, so I think our opponent is most likely to castle here. They might be looking for some tactics. There might be this knight to e4 move perhaps, which they might be looking at. But as I mentioned here, I think we might be a bit happy if they capture our bishop here, simply because we would open up this file against their king. And now we have to make a decision here. Do we go to this square or to this square? I think I like this better, simply because we defend this knight, but also because if we get captured this way, we don't ruin our structure. This is going to be met with this, and then it's going to be difficult, I think, for our opponent to castle into this already weakened king side. They capture, and we will go on ahead and capture quickly like this. So now we have to make a decision as well. Where do we go with our light squared bishop? I think this more active square might be decent. And I'm looking at this because we don't necessarily mind this capture. Or at least I don't think so. But then again, if they do go here, they might just indefinitely pin our knight to our queen. But we do have this knight, however, so we don't have to worry too much about the pin. Also, we might be looking at this kind of a continuation. We don't typically tend to look for queenside castles, but here in this position, we might just do so. We see c5 here. And what do we think about this move? Our opponent's king is still in the castle, in the center. This move seeks to open up this. And currently I'm looking at this queen to b3 move, connecting our rooks eventually, and defending this b2 pawn. But we also have the option here of playing our knight up and recapturing with this knight if they take. I don't think we have to go for this, as we have this other knight though. So let's have a look at this, 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 and this. Then we do still have a connected pawn structure, so I wouldn't mind that position. I don't think we need to play b3 anytime soon, so let's play our queen up. Honestly, queen to c2 might have been better, but I thought I might want to exert some pressure on this pawn here in case they want to move their bishop out. The more I look at it, I might have liked doubling up with our bishop here, hitting down here, but there is no guarantee that our opponent is going to castle kingside. However, this c5 move seems to indicate they might do so. b6. And here I think this move seems to be a bit annoying. I think it would force our opponent to play rook to b8 at least. And then they can no longer castle queenside, which means we can target their kingside immediately. Or at least I think we might be able to. Let's have a look at this, this. And here, even dropping back like this and hitting towards their king might be good. I was looking at the option of queenside castling, but that might be premature here. I don't think we have this move in this position. And I'm seeing no good knight move either. I think we might want to remaneuver our knights as well, because all of our moves here are essentially, yeah, none of them seem good. But we'll go with this, I think. So now we can guarantee our opponent won't queenside castle. I want to look at a few ideas here, because this might become a long-term problem for our opponent if we double rooks here. I do want to play our queen back though, but I also want to play d5, simply because I want to close as much of the center as possible, but they could still hit at our center then. This might not be the best move. So why then am I considering it? Simply because I want to play another move to induce this kingside castle, and then we could probably look to hit our opponent as quickly as possible. We will look at the evaluation afterwards, I think, but for now we will go with this move. Eventually, I think our opponent has to castle here, otherwise their king is going to be too compromised. I want to play a sneaky move here, playing something like rook to h2 as well, so that we are quicker at doubling up, but it might be a too obvious plan. We see b5 here. Which is likely to be met with this capture. The move I'm immediately looking at afterwards is this, hitting the rook and also the knight here. It seems as though our opponent has kind of sniffed out our plans of queenside castling. I'm looking at knight to b3 here. If they capture, then we capture like this, but then we lose tempo, I think. Let's have a look at another option here. We might look at something like this. They might drop back, but then we might have a threat here. Also hitting this. This might not be the best move, but we will go on ahead and try it. Now they might have this threat. But first of all, I would like to look at this. It doesn't really threaten their knight though, but it does apply a lot of pressure to it. And they can't move it either, which might become awkward for them. Simply because we might be able to, in some lines, capture this pawn without them having enough to recapture. This, and we would lose our pawn. I would like to look at a move like this, for example. It would depend on where our opponent places their rook though. So let's go ahead and see what they do first. Rook to b6. Now we have this move. And how should our opponent respond? They could try to block like this. But then what happens if we play queen to b5? They might go back then, and it might be an awkward position. This. This doesn't seem to accomplish a whole lot. So how about we apply the pressure like this and maybe drop back, hitting this, which I'm liking a bit, simply because we apply pressure here as well as keeping our bishop in the game. This would also remove a lot of our opponent's threats, I think, along this other diagonal here, as they can't coordinate with their rook if we move our bishop onto b3 here. This might be a bit too slow, but we will go on ahead and see. We might have an eventual move like this. If they castle here, do we have any threats? Then we might have this, because captures, and we would have checkmate. So our opponent can't currently castle, which is making me a bit happy here. They hit our knight, probably because they identified the same threat as we did. What would happen here? I think our opponent would jump in like this. How about we hit their rook here? This would be, it would look like a fork, sorry, but it wouldn't quite be so. Then this might trap the rook. If we go here and they go like this, then this would trap the rook. So this move is looking quite good, I think. Let's just calculate quickly here. What happens if we take and they take? Then we have this move and our opponent would lose the game, I think. This, and we go here, and all those squares are covered by our knight and our pawn, and the other squares are covered by our bishop. If they go here, what did the trap look like then? I think even a simple a3 might trap their rook. I can't remember, did we have a better trap here? None of those pieces can hit the rook, so I think this is probably it. Our pieces are covered here, so let's have a look at this. They might go for this. Now if we capture, they might go here. Then we might hit this, and we would be up material at least. We could also always put this move in, include it if needs be, but I don't see why we would play that move just yet. This is the most likely response, I think, because it would free up their rook to go back. So I think in that position we don't recapture, because we get better material by doing it the other way around. But they capture our knight, And here we will proceed with this recapture. They check us. And if we want to avoid losing material here, honestly, this might be a move. But then we would have to castle kingside afterwards, which might not be an issue though. This move, and we could play like this even. So I think b5 might be the best move here. No, it's definitely not. This is a mistake by me. And probably a pretty bad one at that. I tried to play a bit quickly here, so I didn't give myself enough time to look at the entire board here. Our opponent is likely to capture here, and now we can't capture this pawn. So how do we recover from this? I think we might have to castle kingside here, as this side is too exposed. This is quite unfortunate, as I think we were up in a good amount of material in a good spot here, sorry. We will castle. And then the skewer. And this is a bit awkward. Typically speaking, when I get down on time, I tend to make those mistakes a bit too often. Hopefully our opponent doesn't see this, but if they do we have a good response? We can't block, as they would take our queen. Could we create a counter threat? I'm not really seeing any. Honestly, this might be a good counter threat, as here we would threaten queen to a8, which would be horrendously bad for our opponent. So here they can't really take our rook. So this might be a saving grace given to us by sheer luck. Now I expect our opponent to castle, and then we would move our rook out of the way here, I think. And now we are only really playing down 1 point of material, but it's 2 minor pieces for a rook, which is typically speaking good for the person with the 2 pieces. But we will go in and see if we are still able to play this properly, or to a good position at least. I guess our opponent has currently spotted this trap here. And after castles, what would we do then? This knight is still not a big factor in the game. They find this beautiful move here. That's incredibly well played by our opponent. It blocks off those squares and we can't go here. So now this is a threat once again. That's an incredible resource. We can't go here either, as it's covered by the knight. So this knight is covering all the critical squares quite perfectly. It's also defended by this pawn. So let's have a look at this here. What happens if we capture? Then we can't capture like this because we would lose our piece again. Yeah, this move is beautiful. That's well played by our opponent. Well, we do have to move our queen. And where would we move it to then? This is at least a quite active square, I think. And here we are going to see this. And we might look at some capture here. We would like to include this knight into the game soon. Let's just jump back. And I think we have to capture this bishop once they take our rook. Because we don't have any fancy looking moves right now. This is incredibly likely to happen. There might be this move as well, but I'm not expecting them to play that. This doesn't work. As we looked at, this drops our rook and even our queen. So here we have to capture. This move here threatens a fork, but it does lose to the same tactic we looked at earlier. So if our opponent moves the knight, I think we would be happy. This capture is a very good move by our opponent. So here once again I think we have to be tricky, because now we are down a lot of material. This move, if they castle, then I think we are in an awkward spot. We can't capture because we would lose our rook. Generally speaking, we are quite lost here, but this might give us counterplay if our opponent doesn't spot the correct moves. And they might even still be able to play queen takes a3 even. And in this position here, they might lose the rook but still get a second queen. But at least we are posing some difficulties for our opponent. However, after castling, this is going to become difficult. We might even look at moves like rook to c1 to hope for some desperate play here, but if they have already castled, then that might be difficult. b3 might even be a move here, but it's not as forcing as, say, queen takes a3. This is unexpected. They're simply looking to flee into the center of the board. But what happens if we play rook to c1? I don't think we have time to think too much about it. Let's go on ahead and try to make our opponent think. This might become quite the headache for them, which is what we are aiming for. Because soon our opponent is going to be up probably a queen as well as a piece. They do castle. But now we can safely capture this pawn at least. As long as there is no fork, which there isn't. If they capture, we can take this pawn. And then we might not have to deal with any queens for a while, at least not any additional queens. This move here doesn't do a whole lot as of yet, but it would force the rook here to stay on f8. They take the pawn, and then we should just take this to make the game a bit easier for us to play. I guess we play up here. Alternatively, we could move on further up, but we don't have time to calculate a whole lot here. This would lose to this. So let's move a bit further away, namely here. Now we have this threat, and we didn't blunder our queen. If we are allowed to play this move, that might be good for us, but our opponent would have a lot of checks here at least. Coming in here, or here, or here, or here, they would have a lot of counterplay options. They might even have an immediate checkmate in that case, I'm realizing. Let's have a look at a sample line. Assuming we get next move. And this, and we might go here. Our opponent might check us away perhaps. And if we move back, if they take and we go here, we have this threat of just bulldozing their position. So this is not quite as trivial as they might hope. This is a good move. We have to go here, I think. And now we can't double up as easily. But we might have e4 at some point. We are covering those checks here at least along this diagonal. But let's say our opponent plays this move, then they can't try to force the queen trade. But then we can check them as well. So it's not as trivial as it might have been. I'm not seeing a good move here, sorry. I'm just going to have to play. And now we can try to hide over here in the corner, but we lost to a fork, it seems. That's unfortunate, but that happens. And now we have a bit less to play for than what I would have hoped, but let's try to create some counterplay. This forks those two pieces here, but they could defend like this, for example. But then I'm realizing we might try to go for some perpetual check here, which could be annoying. They would have to block it. which they might be able to with f5. Or they might block with the bishop. Still, our knight hasn't been able to play the game here, as all its potential squares are covered. So at the moment we are playing with one queen against one queen and 3 other pieces. They defend like this. I'm not seeing a lot of good moves here. This was probably not the best move. But I thought it might help us in some way opening up our knight, which in hindsight I'm not really seeing how it would do so. Do we have any potential good squares for our knight? This might be good, but it's 4 moves away. We would be happy if they capture. Let's go on ahead and play this move. We still keep eyes on this rook, which also does in fact keep eyes on us. Let's move up here. I'm hoping if we get to check our opponent here and they block, we might be able to get our knight in here without being captured. At least we are posing some difficulties for our opponent, but with our time situation here and our material disadvantage, this is looking a bit grim for us. Quite a bit grim. This pawn on f2 is weak, so it could be a good target for our opponent. If I was playing as our opponent here, I think I would look to double up on the second file and just bulldoze on through. Luckily for us, because our opponent has weakened their king at some point this game, so we might have some ideas of a potential perpetual check here. Or we might have some bizarre move like queen to c3 and missing this. Or, sorry, that would be defended, so that would be my miss. But they might in some bizarre way be able to lose material here, which I'm not expecting of course, but we might be lucky. At least we don't have to deal with their outside passed pawns here anymore. They are currently trying to come up with a plan here. My plan here is simply checking on either of those squares here and trying to create as much counterplay as possible without losing our king. But our opponent could probably force a checkmate here if they wanted to, just lining up their pieces. But as long as they don't, we have the option of creating counterplay. Because our opponent's king could always try to hide, I think. Let's say they played their queen, get it to d1 for example, then they would cover, or actually to b1, they would cover this diagonal. So if they move their king here, we can't perpetual check them at any point in the game. And with the queen here and the rook here, for example, they could just bulldoze in through like this. Or they could go onto the second file and get their queen here, for example, which is what I think I might consider, covering this file. And here. Luckily, it seems as though we are posing a bit of problems, or quite a few problems actually, for our opponent. So they seem to be thinking quite a lot here. I'm a bit hesitant to get too optimistic in this position here, but we might be able to look at something positive here if our opponent spends 1.5 more minutes. It is kind of awkward here because they have to consider all those checks here, as well as their knight. They play a move, covering the back rank. And here I'm not seeing a move, sorry, so I'll just play this pawn up. Now the ball is back in our opponent's hands and they have to find a move here. All the while having to deal with both of those hanging pieces if they move their queen for example. And they don't have a lot of plans immediately with this knight, for example. I'm noticing our opponent is spending a lot of time in this position, which is why a move like this was on my radar here, simply because we are passing the ball back into our opponent's hands and they have to come up with a move, which they do seem to be struggling with. And I don't blame them, as this is a very difficult position to play. Or it can be, at least, if they don't know the best plans here. They play their knight up. Let's play our king up. And now they might start stressing a bit. Or at least I'm hoping so. There are no guarantees here at all. It feels kind of dirty here, hoping for a flag, but we have to play for what we've got available to us. We'll play this, so our pawn isn't hanging here. I'm waiting for this move. It's long overdue, I think. But it doesn't necessarily have to do a whole lot. We might just slide out and not trade. But this move, however, is really good. Let's slide our queen back. And I'll explain myself afterwards. Simply if they attack here, then we can capture. And we still keep eyes on this rook. But now we don't have those checks, however. They capture. And now this might get a bit difficult, as our opponent has correctly realized they should trade down as much material as possible. And now this is a win. They force our queens off the board, and this is a trivial conversion. We will, however, try to look for any potential stalemate tricks, but I'm not expecting anything here. Let's just get rid of the pawns first. I think we'll just capture. I honestly don't quite know what I'm hoping might happen here, but we might get lucky. That's just my general idea or thought. This move, however, seems to seal the deal. I won't be terrorizing our opponent here by forcing them to play out a one game after they have converted so well. So I'll go ahead and say thanks for the game and then resign. And then we'll look at our mistakes afterwards here. How should we have played this differently? Now let's have a look here then. So today our accuracy was a bit lower, and we had an accuracy of 70.0 and our opponent had an accuracy of 73.8. I'm noticing we made a hilarious 12 inaccuracies here, and we also had a blunder. So this game was a bit all over the place. We had this quite normal position here, I think, but here I think we forgot the next move, or I did rather. I won't drag you into my mistakes. Apparently in this position we should have played here, which, well, that's a lesson learned, and I'll try to remember that for the King's Indian defense. This allowed them to play this, and then they could also always win the bishop here. They jumped in, and here we should have apparently played bishop to f2. Oh, sorry, that's a misclick by me. Well, they captured, we recaptured, and at this point we weren't actually in a bad position, but this queen move was not all that good. I'm curious as to whether queen to c2 was better, and it was not that bad, at least. Apparently this rook move was quite good, and I might have blinded myself a bit here by looking too strictly at queenside castling, simply because we played this capture, but we didn't really have to queenside castle. But that limited the moves I looked for, and thus I didn't consider moving this rook and dealing with this diagonal here and potentially a b4 move. They played the pawn up, and here we got into this position. This move makes quite a bit of sense, as this b5 move was good. Once again, I didn't consider this move, simply because I didn't want to weaken our queenside, as I thought we might castle there, which was not... I see this might have been a recurring problem this game. I was too blindsided on the idea of queenside castling, so I didn't look at candidate moves over there. Well, we got into this position, and here our opponent did make a mistake. But then this, after we got into this beautiful position here, winning the exchange, we should have just blocked with our knight, but we dropped our bishop. And from this point on, I don't think we had a lot of good moves. We did try to create some counterplay though, played a lot of okay moves here. But our opponent found a lot of good moves with the time they had left on their clock here, and we didn't really have any time or material to make enough counterplay possible. I looked briefly at potentially looking for a stalemate here, but our opponent played well, and I wasn't going to torture them by making them play out this checkmate. Well, that's our game for today, guys. Now we are back down to 1372 ELO, but I'm positive we will probably get back up soon. Thanks a lot for watching to the end of the video, guys, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye bye.